So, recently Nintendo has introduced a brand new app for smartphones that lets you play a wide assortment of music from their video games, and all you need to do is have a subscription to Nintendo Switch Online. Which means that my soundtrack CD collection is now absolutely worthless. To commemorate the occasion, I've decided to show off my soundtrack CD collection. I've got soundtracks for movies, TV shows, anime, and video games. Here's just a look at some of them. Hope you enjoy. The very first soundtrack I ever bought, in fact, I'm pretty sure this is the first CD I ever bought with my own money, was this soundtrack for Star Wars Episode 3: Revenge of the Sith. I remember very distinctly seeing this in a Walmart store all the way back in the year 2005, and deciding to pick it up because I loved the score so much. Honestly, you can't go wrong with John Williams, can you? And in the time since then, I have ended up getting the soundtrack for all 11 Star Wars films, including Rogue One and Solo. Right now, I'm working on getting every single soundtrack for Disney animated films. Are any of you surprised by this? So I have the soundtrack for every animated film that has been made since Bolt in 2008, which I believe accounts for about a quarter of their films so far. However, a lot of their recent animated films, such as Raya and the Last Dragon and Strange World, they didn't release on CD. So if you want to get the soundtrack, you have to get it digitally, and I'm not about to do that. You can't put digital on a shelf and have it collect dust. You can't. I have a lot of soundtracks for a lot of my favorite films and TV shows. Let me go ahead and show off some of the standouts to me. So I've got this 2-disc deluxe edition soundtrack for The Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. At one point in time, this was my favorite film of all time. It's still pretty high up there for me. And these deluxe edition soundtracks are super cool because they open up, they give you multiple discs and art booklets, and it's just such a premium package, and oh man, these things are so cool. Another one that I really love is this soundtrack for the Powerpuff Girls. I loved this show when I was growing up. I still do, and it's so cool to own a CD and plop it in a player every once in a while to listen to old music from the 90s and 2000s. It really brings me back to my childhood. One noteworthy film soundtrack that I have is this soundtrack for Balto, and as you can see, this actually isn't in the best of condition. But I'm just happy to have this because this is a rare CD. This did not sell well, a lot of people didn't buy it, and this goes for a lot of money on the secondhand market. I'm glad I got it for the price that I did. One of my favorite films of all time. See this? This is an actual storyboard that they used when they were making the film. It's mine, I own it. That should give you an idea of how much I liked it. And if this isn't enough, then would it be enough to tell you that I went to Nome, Alaska this year solely because I love this film? Let's go ahead and move on to Pokemon. So, I actually have a complete North American Pokemon CD collection. With one exception, I do not own the soundtrack CD for Pokemon Live, and I don't think I ever will because that thing goes for hundreds of dollars when it ever shows up on eBay at all. If you can believe it, the very first CD I ever owned from Pokemon is this one right here, the CD for Pokemon X, which released in 2006. You know, long after Pokemon was relevant the first time around. Man, I love this CD. It's a Pokeball. I just didn't collect CDs growing up, not to mention my parents may or may not have been against the idea of me liking Pokemon in the first place when I was younger. They got over it when it became my career. But it's fine because turns out there's only like 10 or 12 CDs for Pokemon ever released in North America anyway, and I have most of them except for Pokemon Live. I even have the single CDs here, like this CD for Don't Say You Love Me, the single from Pokemon the first movie, which turns 25 this month. And even this, the single for Katy Perry's Electric for Pokemon's 25th. This isn't even a CD that's listed on Bulbapedia, but it is a Pokemon single CD, and I have it. I also have tons of Japanese Pokemon CDs, and holy cow, there are so many of those that were made. I think it's over 100. I think it's closer to 120 Pokemon CDs that have been released in Japan so far. So even though I have a lot, it's only a small fraction of what's available. In fact, it's possible I have the largest personal collection of Japanese Pokemon CDs outside of Japan, which is kind of crazy. Some of my favorites include this soundtrack for Pokemon Heroes, which is my favorite Pokemon movie, and this is a really rare, hard to get thing. It is not cheap, it's very expensive, it's very rare. Man, am I glad to have this, and I got it just because I love Pokemon Heroes. It doesn't even matter to me, you know, what the value is. We got this beautiful giant release of the soundtrack for Pokemon the first movie, the Japanese soundtrack, of course. It includes this art booklet, which contains art from the Birth of Mewtwo. Trust me, guys, we here in the West, we missed out on some cool stuff. And we got 2 CDs here. We have a CD of the audio drama for The Birth of Mewtwo, which was an audio drama of the first 10 minutes of the film before it got adapted into anime, and then the soundtrack itself for the film. This is a fun, big release, and man, am I happy to have this. I also have a lot of these singles that are miniature CDs. Look at how tiny these are. These are just a tiny fraction of the size of a normal CD. I believe these are about the size of a GameCube disc. That should give you an idea. But they're normal CDs and they play just fine. This is one of my favorites of those. This is the single for The Day a Rainbow Was Born, which is the ending for Pokemon 3. And as you can see here on the back, this CD also includes an English version of the song called Just Like a Rainbow, and this was the one and only time that song was ever released. And guys, it'll make you cry. Another noteworthy Pokemon Japanese soundtrack I have is this CD, which is nothing but spa music for Psyduck. Do you remember that scene in Pokemon Detective Pikachu where they are in the car listening to spa music so Psyduck doesn't blow up? This CD is the music that Psyduck was listening to, and it's an hour and a half of it, which I think is just hilarious. In the past, I have ordered a lot of Japanese CDs through a service called Buy, where I buy them in Japan and have them shipped to me over here in the United States, and I have unboxed them in Buy unboxings on my channel. So if you're interested in seeing a lot more of the Japanese CDs I have, because I have a lot of them, then be sure to go and check those unboxings out. I think that you'll find them pretty interesting. There's one more category of Pokemon CDs in my collection, and that is the video game soundtracks. Man, I love these. You may think that there's not much of a point in owning the songs physically when you could just play the game and listen to them all you want, but there's something about the art. I mean, look at this art for Pokemon X and Y. Mega Mewtwo on the back there, Xerneas Yveltal there. So cool. We got the discs with beautiful artwork on them. Also, I'm pretty sure the 4th disc of this release of X and Y includes some of the music from Pokemon Generations or Pokemon Origins, or whichever one it is, which I think is pretty cool. But for a lot of the more recent Pokemon games, it's just really nice to be able to own a physical copy of the music and listen to over and over and over again, even when you're not playing the game. It's just so cool. Plus, the art is cool, and this is way higher quality than it's ever going to sound online, which is the #1 reason to own physical media, is it's always going to be better than what you can get through streaming. I have most of the soundtracks. I'm still missing a few key ones, including the soundtrack for Heart Gold and Soul Silver, which, you know, that's very expensive. But I have all the recent ones, everything from Black 2 and White 2 all the way up through Scarlet and Violet, which is a pretty cool release in itself because unlike all the other soundtracks, this is 6 discs instead of 4. So that's 2 extra discs chock full of music, and it includes the soundtracks for the Hidden Treasure of Area Zero expansion. Speaking of video game soundtracks, let me show you some of my absolute favorites. We got the soundtracks here in huge, ginormous boxes for The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, the greatest video game of all time, and The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. This releases 5 discs, and this releases 9 discs. You got 14 discs of music. And I don't mind saying I have listened through both of these more than once. They are beautiful, beautiful soundtracks, and oh man, Nintendo knows how to make music. You know who else knows how to make music? Square. So what I have here is a complete stack of music from Final Fantasy VII and the Final Fantasy VII Remake project. These are all the discs that I have, and I'm pretty sure that this is everything from the video games, at least, that has been released so far. Got the soundtrack for the original game right here. I think this is across, 4 discs. Remake itself had 3 different releases, if you can believe it. We've got this 7-disc release for Final Fantasy VII Remake itself, followed by this 4-disc release of Final Fantasy VII Remake Soundtrack Plus, which includes 4 discs worth of extra music that was not included in the original release. And then this release, which is another 4 discs, I think, of Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade. And then finally, this just released this year, the 7-disc release of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. And I hope that there's a soundtrack plus for this game, because there is a lot of music that is not in here that I really want to get. Wow, there's a lot of fingerprints on there. I also have this single release for No Promises to Keep, the theme song of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. The full version is not on the soundtrack. If you want the full version, the only way to hear it is to get this CD, which is absolutely worth it, by the way, because this is Game of the Year, and it's not even close. I have other Final Fantasy music as well. For example, I've got this deluxe giant 8-disc release of the score for Final Fantasy XVI. This won Best Soundtrack at the Game Awards last year, rightfully so. If there's a Final Fantasy soundtrack that's been nominated, why do you bother nominating anything else? Honestly, I'm positive Rebirth is going to win this year. Man, just look at that artwork of all the icons. It's so good, so beautiful. Man, I have mixed feelings about the game, but the music, chef's kiss. I've also got some other random Final Fantasy soundtracks here. So I've got the soundtrack for Final Fantasy 13. I got it because it was cheap. And then I got soundtracks for a few spin-offs like Chocobo Mystery Dungeon and Chocobo Racing from the PlayStation 1. Look at those old graphics. Wow, man, that brings me back. I will absolutely get more Final Fantasy soundtracks in my future. I love the music. It's some of the best music ever put into video games. I really want to get more, especially the mainline games. Let's take a quick glance at some other video game soundtracks I have, and this is just a small sampling. I have plenty more. It's just I'm showing off my favorites for this video, and that's it. So I got this 2-disc awesome soundtrack of Super Smash Bros. For 3DS and Wii U. It is 2 discs, you flip it over, that's the Wii U songs, that's the 3DS songs. As far as I remember, this is the one and only time I ever actually got something from Club Nintendo. I wasn't huge into it, and I probably wouldn't be huge into it even now that I own hundreds of Nintendo games if it were still around, but I do remember getting this when it released and thinking that it was so cool that I was able to just order a CD from Nintendo. And I have the soundtrack for Super Mario Odyssey. Beautiful, beautiful soundtrack. I love this thing. Some really awesome tunes, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what the music sounds like in the next 3D Mario game whenever that comes out on the next Nintendo system. And finally, the last sub-collection of my collection that I want to talk about, Sword Art Online. By the way, congratulations to the players for beating the game this week. November 7, 2024, the game was beat. So we got this 4-disc set here from the first 2 seasons of the show all the way through Mother's Rosario. And I know that people don't really care for this show, but I love it a lot, and I just really like listening to the music from it. I've got plenty of CDs, again, a lot that I'm not even going to show here, but I have the score from the first 2 seasons. I've got this awesome single for Crossing Field, which was the first opener for the show. I got random CDs here like this song collection of songs sung by the heroines of the show. I probably can't understand most of these because they're in Japanese, but man, I love listening to them. And I have the scores from the films. So this is the score from Progressive Aria of a Starless Night, which if you were to watch one thing from SAO, I would say watch this film specifically. I think it's a great introduction to the show, and I think that it stands on its own pretty well without you needing to know anything else about it. And you know what the great thing is about Japanese CDs? I'm going to be going to Japan next April, so we'll see if I can't find some more stuff when I'm over there to add to my collection. So that brings this video to an end. That was just a small taste of my soundtrack CD collection. Please let me know what soundtracks you collect, if you collect any at all, or at least what your favorite CD is that you own, soundtrack or otherwise. And remember, it may be more convenient to stream songs, but as long as you own a physical copy, it's yours. No one can take that away from you. It'll sound better than over Spotify, and You don't have to pay a yearly subscription fee in order to listen to it. Thanks everyone for watching, and stay tuned for more.